Mr. Conter, let me start with you. I have town hall meetings in each of my 36 counties, and overwhelmingly, what employers tell me their top issue is they can't find enough workers. And invariably, that involves those folks can't get housing. And my concern is particularly for the missing middle this morning, middle-class folks. Nurses and firefighters would be a pretty good example. And I want to ask you and my colleagues, we always try to operate under the theory that you've got to build a bipartisan coalition and focus on what works. We've all been talking about LIHTC, the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program. So what I've said is, quaint idea, why don't we build on what works? And that's what my middle-income housing tax credit is all about, to try to get shelter for folks like nurses and firefighters and middle-income people across the country. And when we talk about middle-income people, we're talking about families with incomes between 60% and 100% of median income. Obviously, depends on the area in which people live. But I'd like your thoughts on how the home builders feel about a middle-income housing tax credit. I heard you touch on it a little bit, but I understand that you all support it, and that's some good news. And as you know, in the Pacific Northwest, this also relates to the well-being of the wood products industry because it creates more opportunities in those rural communities for timber and forestry. So your thoughts?
Well, first, I would start with that we strongly support your bill. We believe that the missing middle is the hardest area to serve because typically they buy entry-level homes if they're on the home ownership side. And if they're on the multifamily side, they don't qualify for LIHTC or other subsidies, even direct subsidies such as Section 8 voucher program. So they have a disproportionate amount of their revenue or their income spent towards shelter, and they don't have the ability to accumulate down payments for even the lowest priced housing that is available in within the private sector. So this tax credit would solve part of that problem, and that's why we do strongly support it. But many people on the panel have already talked about the regulatory burden in producing housing. NIMBYism is a large part of that also. I know that in my community, I experience people that they want school teachers and police officers and fire people to serve their community, but they put in restrictions that affect housing prices that force them not to live within that community. And so I will tell you that my colleagues in the building industry want to build for every sector of America. We don't concentrate on one sector over another. We will be working with you and very much appreciate your support with respect to the middle income housing tax credit. And obviously we need have fresh approaches in terms of trying to unsnarl some of that red tape at the local level. Let me get one more question in. I'm going to ask this of you, Mr. Roberts. You heard me say I'm very concerned about this trend of some in the private equity industry. What some are doing in the industry is exploiting loopholes in the tax code to maximize their own returns while jeopardizing the low-income purpose of affordable housing. And I want to walk you through this because as far as I can tell, we're losing something like 10,000 affordable housing units per year just with one of these loopholes involving something called the qualified contract. And low-income housing tax credit properties are supposed to remain affordable
for 30 years. However, this loophole allows LIHTC operators to sell their properties after 15 years to private developers who are going to go out and rent the units at higher prices. And as I say, thousands of units apparently are already being lost per year, and projections are that it's going to go up. I have proposed legislation to close that loophole. I'd like your thoughts on why that's important.
It's critically important, Chair Wyden, because it's so hard to build and rehabilitate homes to be losing them through what has really become a loophole is just taking us back in the wrong direction. The problem is that formula under the qualified contract provision was written in 1989 when the low-income housing credit was very young and immature, and the real estate markets were very different, and it no longer serves its purpose and now has become an unintended exit ramp. This is not something that the original investors have been involved in, but sometimes we see new investors come in, particularly after the close of the 15-year compliance period, for the purpose of making
my time is up, but I think what Mr. Roberts is highlighting is a lot of these programs, and essentially the infrastructure, the rules were written decades ago. And you heard me mention algorithms being used to outbid Americans who just want to own a home. When you were talking about 1989, nobody was thinking about algorithms. So I very much appreciate the input. Senator Crapo.